Welcome back to Talk Today. The time is 7:27. We'll have the papers in just a moment, but here is what else is coming up on today's programme.
Matt Hancock appeared before the COVID inquiry yesterday. We'll be speaking to a care home owner for his reaction to Hancock's comments. That's at 8:10.
Princess Catherine appeared in public last night for the first time since being named in the Dutch version of Omid Scobie's book. Royal commentator Afia Hagen joins us at 8:45.
And broadcasting royalty joins us after 9. TalkSport's new breakfast presenter, the legend that is Jeff Stelling, will be here to tell us all about his new show. Broadcaster Matthew Stadman and writer Emma Wolfe are with us right now, though, for a look through this morning's papers. We're going to kick off with The Times. We've just been discussing Matt Hancock's appearance before the COVID inquiry yesterday. We've got more of it coming up today, Emma. What did we learn from this day?
This is the rolling... We've had weeks and weeks. We're going to have months and years of this.
Yes.
Politicians rocking up to say, not my fault, Gov, and that's basically what Matt Hancock was saying yesterday. Not my fault. If I had been listened to, then things would have been very, very different. Number 10, according to him, ignored his warnings. They didn't... they blocked his attempts to sort of activate Cobra. They didn't take the pandemic seriously. It's full of people saying... It's not my fault, don't blame me. And you know what? This man was leading the Department of Health. I mean, I think he was utterly incompetent and shouldn't even have been at the head of our health department during this pandemic, quite apart from the fact that he was clearly distracted. His hands and his mind were on other issues at the time. We have to remember... Well, his hands were full with other things.
Standing there night after night as well,
he was
giving us the nightly
It's so
news
insulting.
conference.
This whole thing is so insulting, OK? Because, first of all, you had all the people who died, tens and tens of thousands of people. Then
He would have saved lives, according to Matt Hancock.
Then you had all the relatives who lost people. Then you had people like me, and I presume you guys, who obeyed the rules.
Nope.
You know, I certainly did, and my mental health suffered enormously as a consequence of the pandemic. And here you have this appalling sort of infighting, post hoc infighting, squabbling between the likes of Cummings and Hancock. It is so undignified. One thing he did seem to accept was that this protective ring was not actually thrown around care homes as he told us it was at the time.
But he repeatedly told us it was.
He did.
He also kept saying we're following the science. Yesterday he said, or maybe we weren't following the science.
And that is extraordinary.
But you're right. So there was a real human cost to this. The fact is they didn't test people before they went into care homes. And Sarah's
And there were lies about the testing. We hear about creative counting, little jokey messages between a senior civil servant and Matt Hancock. And he met his coronavirus testing targets, and he reached 100,000. And the senior civil servant says, "Oh, well done for that creative counting."
Well, that's what I mean.
So
that's standing up at the nightly news conference and having to have a line.
What would you say if you lost someone in that first wave and tens of thousands died in that first wave of coronavirus, and you're the mother or the father or the son or the daughter, whatever it is, and you now hear the health secretary saying, we should have shut down earlier, and had I had my way, we would have done. Well, it doesn't help you much.
But he's shifting the blame, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Absolutely
right.
But
it's so upsetting. But whatever happened, this is government. This is government now saying that they got it badly wrong to such an extent that tens of thousands of people died who didn't need to die.
And there are relatives who are standing outside the COVID inquiry day after day wanting to hear answers and saying at this point they haven't got them.
Can we also talk about the other costs? There are costs of...
Well said.
For example, I had a baby in lockdown, a baby who spent the first 2 years of his life surrounded by people in masks. I gave birth in a hospital alone in a lockdown hospital. There are many, many, many young people whose education and whose mental health will never recover.
But
there are people who lost their... Yeah, I know, and you were pro-lockdown and I was very, very anti, and I didn't, as much as I could, I didn't follow the rules, and I'm happy to admit that because I think fundamentally locking down your population on this kind of basis, on this kind of evidence,
but whichever side you're
wrong.
on, guys, whichever side
but they were
you're on,
incompetent.
this is still so undignified.
Of course,
and the point is we're not learning lessons.
I would agree with
and
that.
And how would it be if there was another... We heard about chicken flu and pig flu and whatever the other day. Do you feel confident this government would be able to
Well, it's not even
cope with
that.
things any
Your point
better?
was really valid about the inquiry taking far too long. I thought the whole idea behind this was actually to make sure we're prepared for the next one. Well, we won't know the outcome for many years to come. Let's move on because time is tight to the eye. I couldn't believe the headline this morning. Labour. Labour has quite an unassailable lead at the moment, I think 20-point lead or thereabouts, a general election coming around the corner. The EU will be our #1 priority for UK foreign policy, says David Lammy. What part of not listening to the electorate do they not understand?
Well, first of all, you are Mr. Reform, right?
I am.
So it's perhaps in your hands the next government of this country, because if you take sufficient numbers of votes from the Conservatives, you are going to get a Labour government, and I find that absolutely fascinating.
David.
And I'd celebrate that.
Well,
but
no. And I'm not here in a Reform capacity, but voting for another party doesn't necessarily mean voters from the Conservative Party. It means voters who are disaffected with two
But likely
major
it will be.
Well, I know, absolutely
You guys
not.
have been tearing strips out of the Tories.
Well, Reform UK has indeed been doing that. But in the Red Wall, of course, remember, I was an MEP for the North West. So I wouldn't say you can substantiate that completely.
Is that a smile I see?
No, but the point
your
is
face?
you should vote positively for the party that best encompasses your views and values.
On this specific story, which is what I should have started with, shouldn't I? This is an interesting headline because it will terrify some Red Wall voters, the idea that Labour wants to draw closer to the EU. But let's be absolutely unambiguous about this. I don't think there's anyone in this room who seriously thinks that under a Labour government we are going to rejoin the EU. To my mind, this is David Lammy talking grown-up politics about doing proper business. About doing proper business with other leaders. You have to build relationships. If you want to get on top of the crisis on the Channel, if you want to stop these boats, you have to have proper relationships with people like Macron and Schulz, and that's what Lammy is saying is going on with Starmer. There's a good chemistry, he says, with Macron, and we need to have proper meetings with the bloc every few months. If we don't, then we make a rod for our own back.
I'm sitting on my hands.
Yeah, I'll intervene here. But that comes after, as Ursula von der Leyen this week said, the EU goofed up. Yeah. It's up to the younger generation to fix this, but the UK could rejoin.
And increasingly, European countries are not happy and are looking as though they could be leaving as well. So I think David Lammy, Nexit. Look at Holland. I think that David Lammy is an absolute. I think he's really misjudged the mood of the country, and I agree with David. It's deeply insulting. We had the Brexit referendum. Let's move on. Please, can we move on? Because we've had 7 years.
But he's not saying let's go back, Emma. He's not saying let's go back.
Yes,
he's saying let's do proper grown-up business.
No, he isn't.
You know what, David?
On our doorstep.
No, what he actually said. I don't have the quote here. What he actually said is, we won't go back in the current political cycle.
And a cycle could be 15 years, 20 years.
What he means is, we won't do it immediately, but for David Lammy, that would be the goal.
If we want to run an effective country, and an effective country politically and economically, we have to have good relations with our European neighbours. And he's saying they will be our priority. And partly they'll be our priority because at the moment, let's remember, guys, there's a war in Europe.
The fact is, we don't want to be in a federal Europe. We don't want to be dictated to in terms of defence policy, foreign policy.
Doesn't mean that we can't work with our European counterparts. It doesn't mean that we can't work with them.
Yeah, I don't think we're working very effectively with it at the moment, and it matters at the top level of government. If France and Germany seriously think there's going to be a shift in tone, that will make us safer, and it will help us, I hope, in fight the crisis on our Channel.
You talked about the relationship between Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron. He's in Dubai for the COP summit, and a lot of that is about Sir Keir Starmer building those international alliances with a view to the election next year, isn't it? But we've heard from Rishi Sunak at The Express, I think it is, Matthew, warning China to take urgent action to slash greenhouse gases.
This is front page of The Times, may also be in The Express. And when you talk to people who either deny that climate change is happening or say that there's nothing much we can do about it, what do they say? They say, just look at China. Well, Sunak seems to be trying to address this point. Whether he's signalling to his own voters or he's really trying to send a message to China, I'm not sure, maybe both. But he's saying that certain countries, including China, and I think China is name-checked, have to take a long, hard look in the mirror to decide whether they are achieving their promises. And it's right. But what does this say? It says we have to continue to meet our own responsibilities. Because if we don't, how can we possibly put pressure on countries like China?
Well, at what cost to the British people? The fact is, this net zero enshrined in law, the fact is it's making people poorer when other countries, as you rightly say, China, Russia, not doing that.
COP is a joke. We are in the 28th iteration now of COP, and it's not working. Emissions are rising, not falling. We have the whole lot of them going out there on private jets and lecturing to the rest of us. And we have...
How do you want them to get this?
Do you remember the pledges of COP26?
Commercial airlines are available.
They could get on a commercial airline. I understand they need to go separately and all of the security issues, but they can still fly out there. They don't need to go by private jet. That's not the point. That's not going to save the planet or not. You know that. But COP26 and all the pledges that came out of Glasgow, COP27, all the pledges that came out of Egypt, it'll be the same this year. Every year we have this global jolly, this global farce. It's like, you know...
You say it's making people poorer,
Davos.
though. This is a really important point to grapple with. In the medium and possibly short term as well, if we don't get on top of climate change, we will all become poorer and we will have much, much more significant migration crises. Many, many more people want to come to our country when their parts of the world are no longer habitable.
But isn't the point that they're addressing here, which is obviously it's in the UAE, they want to strike oil and gas deals, but they say this needs to be phased out over a period of time. I would actually agree with that. The fact is, people can't afford that. The UK makes up 1% of global emissions. So why are we beating ourselves with a hairshot?
So that we can be a global leader and put proper pressure on countries like China, which emit far more than us.
OK. Thank you very, very much indeed, Emma and Matthew. They'll be back in just under an hour.